for me.
Hi everyone, we're back again. It's Ben Dinnery here with the Fantasy Doc. It's Raj Brar for 3CB Performance. You know, it's the roundup. I always love these. My favourite time of the week. Raj, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. My favorite time as well. How are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. I've got some great news for you this week. It's not about Liverpool. There is no Liverpool in this week's show. But we're going to stick with the L's and we're going to have a look at Leicester City. You know, they've been in the news and made some big headlines this week, double game week. And I suppose the standout, the main talking point of this weekend was the injury to Harvey Barnes. Unfortunately, it was stretchered off with what looked to be a pretty serious looking knee injury. Now, we've already heard from Brendan Rodgers, who's spoken ahead of their midweek fixture. And he said, you know, that the young winger is going to be scheduled for surgery, hopefully on Tuesday. Now, as part of that pre-match press conference, he actually alluded to the fact that a little bit of his, what he quoted, a bit of his patella came off during when he overstretched, and that was causing the problem. And that's something that they're going to be addressed. Now, ideally, they're looking at a return to play within and around 6 weeks. So in your opinion, and from what you've seen from footage, one, you know, what types of injury are we looking at? Because a bony injury, avulsion or whatever it is, that seems quite serious. And would that 6 week timeline be realistic if indeed that was the case?
Yeah, so this sounds like based on what Roger said and also what he said following the match, where he said that this was something that Barnes, he had some irritation prior to this match. And in this match, it was kind of like he had that final impetus. It sounds like he also mentioned cartilage during that interview. So my guess is based on putting two and two together, based on what he said about patella. He's talking about cartilage on the underside of the patella that's been kind of chipped off into the joint. If he had an actual fracture of the patella, you'd be looking at a longer timeline of just 6 weeks. Whereas if you remove that chip piece called a loose body removal, pretty straightforward surgery, they might clean out some of that underneath surface. And that's potentially a 6 to 8 week return timeline, which sounds fair in this case.
Yeah, so we hopefully will see Harvey Barnes again this season. And I know you've uploaded a video late last night on the 3CB YouTube channel. So please, guys, check that out. Great. If you want to know a little bit more about what potentially has happened and the procedure that Harvey Barnes will go through on Tuesday, then Raj is your man. Now, staying with Leicester, we also we had some good news. So the bad news has been tinged with a little bit of hope with regards to James Maddison. Now, this is something that we touched upon last week, and there was a lot of speculation with regards to, you know, what the extent of the problem was. The worry for us and Madison owners was that, you know, he travelled down to London with the club doctor to meet a specialist. Now, they haven't sort of divulged any of the specific details other than the fact that there was pain and discomfort coming from a hip tendon, is what Brendan Rodgers alluded to. But there is hope that he can return to the training pitches later on this week, although it's probably unrealistic that he'll be available for game week 27. But looking ahead past that, you know, James Maddison could be, you know, back in contention. So in terms of the actual specifics of the injury itself, what are we looking at in terms of a hip tendon injury?
Yes, I mean, to your point, this is very, very good news because the tendon tells us that it's most likely a muscular issue. And so depending on what exactly is going on, this could be, let's say if it's a grade 1 tendon issue, you know, it could be a 7 to 10 day return timeline where he just misses these 2 matches, 7 to 14 day return where he misses two matches and he's able to return. Whereas something we were concerned about last week is if this is an internal hip joint issue, it can become more serious. So definitely looking at more of a short-term timeline here. And the player was in great form as well. So, you know, it might be a quick return to performance after only a short timeout.
And in terms of the actual injury itself, and, you know, is that something that Webby's would need to be managed, or does it have the same risk of re-injury or recurrence rate as maybe some of the other, major muscular problems that we see happening, hamstring, for example?
Yeah, I would say it doesn't, because the hip muscles are stressed, but they're stressed more globally as a group, whereas hamstrings or adductors or calves tend to be more isolated in the action that they're doing. Now, definitely needs to be managed, especially with him coming off the previous surgery. But this sounds more of something where he was overloaded rather than having some overt specific injury. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and that certainly fits with, because we've seen with Madison, and we will touch upon Jamie Vardy, those two players had been managed quite carefully around heavy fixture loads. But in recent games, we've seen Madison and Vardy both start Premier League, Europa League, Premier League, and so on. So it's for the first time we've seen those players, and that would suggest, again, maybe potentially just a little bit of overloading. Now, we've touched upon Jamie Vardy, and again, we know that ongoing calf issues, not just this season, but maybe going back to previous seasons. Also, he's just came back from a minor surgical procedure on his groin. It didn't look great during parts of Sunday's game. He didn't look to be 100%. And Brendan Rodgers come out, as part of his lengthy injury update, said that Jamie Vardy did feel a little bit of discomfort, but he was able to play the 90 minutes and get through that. And he just thinks it's a little bit of soreness, a little bit of discomfort. Looking ahead again of games coming thick and fast, is that, if you were a Jamie Vardy owner in terms of your fantasy teams and you're looking around double game weeks and those upcoming fixtures, is that something to be, worried about or certainly concerned about with regards to maybe game time and minutes for Jamie?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a concern, because, like you said, they'd managed him quite closely, and now we're starting to see maybe they're taking the reins off a little bit, and he's starting to have some symptoms. Now, that being said, it's a concern, but Vardy's also been dealing with this for years now, so he might be a little bit more in tune with what's going on, understanding it's just some soreness versus it's an overt pull, right? So that goes both ways. There's definitely higher concern than there was before, but I think he understands his body a little more than most players may, just based on how long he's been dealing with this issue for.
Yeah, and his age become a factor in this now? And I know you said he will know his body, he's 34 years of age, but does that also mean because he knows his body, then he has to take care of it a little bit better, and maybe, it maybe takes a little bit longer to recover?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know recovery times increase. We know as you age and you have more wear on your body, it can lead to increased injury risk. For example, it's a different muscle, but there are studies showing with the hamstring, year over year, every year that you play professional football, there's a 30% increase in hamstring injury risk. That just speaks to the cumulative effect of playing at a high level. So certainly age always comes into play. And then also with him, his playing style, very, very acceleration-based player, which puts a lot of emphasis on those calf muscles.
Yeah, cool. And while we're talking about calf injuries, and we're talking about those players who are maybe moving towards the twilight years of their career, Jonny Evans, another player that Brendan Rodgers basically said, he would run through a brick wall for this team. He's prepared to do anything. But he was forced off again, and another injury on Sunday's match. And the worry here is, given that he's prepared to put everything on the line, that he was unable to continue, and he's set for a scan on Monday afternoon. We're recording just before the results of that. But again, is that something to be aware of? And what are the, are there any sort of complications that could be caused with maybe, playing through this calf problem, or pushing players, or maybe overloading them at this age?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's always risk for compensation along the entire lower body if one issue. I think he described it as, or Rodgers described it as a dead calf. He wasn't able to push through it. And like you're saying, this is a player we know who's willing to give it his all. So if he has to come off, clearly there's some dysfunction going on. We'll find out more about what's happening, but certainly a concern here for him.
Listen, Raj, always great to catch up with your good self. The Leicester special, the fantasy doc himself. If you're not following him on social media, on YouTube, why not? It's at 3CB Performance. Produce some fantastic content, some fantastic videos and insight. Guys, check it out. So until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.